Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. It is your friend and neighbor, Samuel Richards, and I'm here to give you a couple updates before we start our newest episode of Community Roots. First, I wanted to tell you about our Patreon. It is launching in about 10 days. This is one of our newest projects that I am so excited for because it's a way that we can really grow and spread this message of mental health, good mental health. So I just wanted to tell you guys about our $5 entry, just so you can learn a little bit about it. It includes all of our bonus content, and that includes we're going to start putting out monthly episodes of Unpack That, as well as monthly episodes of listener questions. And then you get access to all that, all our future bonus content. If we do any traveling shows, if we interview some people that we can't quite fit into Off the Beaten Path, then all of that will become available. So I call that the En Route package. So if you are interested in supporting us, definitely click on the Patreon link and head over there. None of this actually starts until May 1st, so you've got some time before it charges you, and you've got some time before you have access to our content. But putting your name in now is a way that you can say, hey, I support you guys. And it'll also kick you right back up, so you'll start right on May 1st. Also, go ahead and click the link tree at the bottom of the description so that you can see our Facebook and Instagram. Or you can search Facebook and Instagram for @communityroots.pod. That's the way that we get a lot of our updates to you, as well as some mental health tips and other things that we find interesting. So go ahead and check that out. Definitely check us out on iTunes if you enjoy the show, and rate and review us. All of that definitely helps us go up in the charts, puts mental health on a broader pedestal, and just really shares the word. If you like this, just tell us what you like. Every time we get a new review, there's always a little text back and forth with each other as we kind of share those words of affirmation with each other. So thanks, and we look forward to future feedback. I wanted to end on just reaching out and saying, if you have a question or concern, or these topics kind of hit you deep, or you have something to add to the conversation, please reach out to us. We love building that community. We love connecting with you all. And so go ahead and email us at communityroots.pod@gmail.com, or you can go to Facebook and Instagram and message us through there. We have already had some great conversations with listeners, so please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. So I think I've kept you long enough. I hope you enjoy our newest episode. I will talk to you soon. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Community Roots, a place where we gather in community to talk about mental health so we can travel the journey of life together. I'm Samuel Richards.
I'm Julie Richards.
I'm Sarah Wakefield.
And we have continued the quarantine. We are recording from home, and I'm excited for this conversation. Our bi-weekly chat.
So I thought we would start off with a check-in a little bit. I was part of a meeting with colleagues yesterday that I will give credit to Jan Bergstrom on her questions that she asked us for our check-in. But I thought we could do that with our little Community Roots family here and ask what has been the hardest part, what's been the most helpful, and what are you learning as it relates to COVID-19 and the quarantine. Who wants to start?
I think Samuel does.
Okay, I'll start again. I mean, for the first time. Okay. What has been the hardest part? I actually like getting some distance from it. I think that the hardest part has definitely been the influx of news. Like, I feel like the news is constant and overwhelming. Another thing that I find difficult too is just kind of like the crappy weather combined with nothing else being open. Like, I feel trapped sometimes indoors, and whenever it's raining outside or it's like 30 degrees outside, as things are in Ohio right now, it makes it difficult for me too, because then I feel like I'm confined to the same two spaces, like my garage and my house. So that can be a little bit frustrating as well. So
Feeling
those are
cooped
kind
up.
of right, cooped up, and just wanting a change of scenery. Like, I've been going to the food bank recently, and just getting that out of the house is like sad, but it's also like I need that 20-minute drive total, like elapsed to just go pick it up and come back. But anyway, maybe we can tackle these questions one on one. If Sarah, you want to take the first
Well, you
question
missed
as
my
well.
reference there to cooped up, with the chickens.
Chicken cooped up. That's what
Yeah.
we call it.
Had to get the full effect in there.
You can't mention chickens around Sarah, because then she'll just start laughing uncontrollably.
You said you were trying to help your chickens. Like, what is that? Yeah. Okay. My hardest part during this quarantine, honestly, I had thought I had a different answer earlier. I mean, while I was thinking about this, but truly, if I'm going to be real, it's the fact that I am not as active as I have been, and I'm like, my clothes don't fit the same way. I put a pair of jeans on the other day, and I kind of regretted it. And it's hard because I was getting into such a great routine before all of this started, with, doing some strength training classes, being active outside the house. And, my walk to work was a half mile. So I was getting at least a mile in of walking each day, plus whatever I did on the side. And I was doing hot yoga 2 to 3 days a week. And I was just feeling so good. And then this happened. And the first 2 weeks it was, eating gummy bears and ice cream and just trying to get through whatever this whole chaos of uncertainty. And, and now I'm starting to add activity back in now that I've kind of settled into somewhat of a routine. But I think the hardest part has just been not like facing that change in my physical self.
I think one of my hardest parts, even the answer to this question is evolving, I'm realizing, because when I answered it yesterday, I right away knew that it was that I'm kind of a deep processor, and having all this information overload from so many sources that everybody thinks they need to send you an email or an update from companies, and all these training programs that are being offered for free that I'm trying to weed through to figure out which things do I really want to prioritize. And it's just all been overload and too much. And at the same time that I am feeling like I need to slow down, or this idea where people are saying, oh, you'll have more time to rest, I'm thinking, how do I get to that? Because that's been a challenge. But I think one of the hardest parts today, as I'm realizing it, is just how the waves of things, this is how it seems to me in my mind as I'm processing it, is that we had the first wave of closings of all those different things we would say in a row, like schools and restaurants and libraries and gyms and hair salons and everything else. And then there was the wave of hearing that people are testing positive or people are dying. And so that becomes a new reality. And then where I feel like we're in a third wave right now is people are talking about when they want to reacclimate to society. And, the beaches are open in Florida, and people are talking about they need to earn an income for their family and they're not going to live by fear. So they're wanting to get back to work and all the different angst, I think, of everybody's emotions of being tired of being in quarantine or kind of that cooped up feeling or whatever, and kind of wondering where this transition will go for us in this next phase. Because it's kind of like, I think, going to go through various phases of it, maybe. I'm curious, like, if there would be a level that they give us, like, you know, color code it like they did after 9/11 or something to show us, like, what level of safety do we even have, if they even have a clue on that or not. I don't know how possible that is, but I guess those are some of the areas that have been hard for me.
I do want to go on with some of these other questions so that we move through the episode, but I did want to comment on one of those thoughts, just being like kind of the let up of the quarantine. I think that makes things difficult because everybody is talking about like, oh, things are going to open up and things are like, we're going to open up businesses, blah, 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 blah. Like Ohio is talking about opening up on May 1st. And so that mixed with sort of like just feeling tired of being at home feels like a dangerous combination where I feel myself wanting to let up, to like relax on a lot of things, even though it's still just as dangerous and unsafe out. I'm like mentally like, oh, maybe I should go to the store and pick up this, even though I definitely don't need to go to the store for anything. I'm just looking for some difference to the like same repeating nature. So that's just what I thought of whenever you brought up kind of people wanting to get out of this quarantine. Like I also myself feel it, and then it makes it double as hard whenever like I know we shouldn't do it. Like I know even if they let up the quarantine, I'll be staying at home.
And the thing that's confusing to me too is, like, I thought Ohio was a leading state of our leadership and how we're, you know, so well informed by Dr. Acton and, you know, their projections and how closely they're watching this. And so I assumed that we were taking a pretty wise, but also like conservative, let's be careful kind of approach. And then hearing that other states are, you know, closing school until the end of the year at least. And I've heard of, you know, some different closings for the summer and various things. So I'm feeling a little bit confused about Ohio right now. I have to confess, I have not been listening to the daily check-ins that they do. So I might just be misinformed or needing to update on some of that. But I'm just curious if we get to this May 1st time that if they are letting up, how we went from being really on top of it and being closed to, I don't know. I guess I'll be curious to see how that all unfolds and happens.
So I'm going to move on to the most helpful. Like what about this quarantine has been the most helpful to me? Right? Is that what we're kind of going for? I think I was trying to think about this. Like, I don't know. I think it's made me definitely appreciative of my partner because I think that we have gotten along really well and we've supported each other very well. And we're learning to respect each other's boundaries and stuff like that. So I feel like a strengthening maybe of my relationship bonds, as well as I also think of contacting old friends again during this quarantine. Like I've found myself talking to people from my history from like high school and college, and being able to catch up with them in some ways has also been sort of like reaching out, kind of like the importance of sadness. Like if you reach out, then people reach out back to you. And I felt that in this quarantine that's been really helpful. And I got little chicks, so those have also been fun.
The most helpful for me during this time, I think it's really helped me understand more about how introverted I am. I'm a very high functioning introvert. I can mingle and socialize, and I go to work and I FaceTime with a lot of people, face to face, not just FaceTime. And then once that day's over, I keep pushing myself because I have more things to do. But really, I am an introvert and I need downtime. That I can't just go from work to socializing and then go straight to bed. I have to have, like, this is pre-quarantine. I have to have like an hour or two of when my brain can settle. And this time has really helped me understand that I really do function best when I have a lot of alone time or non-FaceTime. I feel very content with it. And that is something that I haven't experienced since I was a kid. You know, when I was really young, I was homeschooled and you know, living on a farm, I would just spend all this time by myself. And I haven't had that. And this is the first time that I've really had that. So I think I'm learning more about myself and how much I appreciate just being by myself or doing my own thing. Or
That you're pretty good company, right, Sarah? You're like, I'm learning I'm good company for myself.
I'm just so happy to be by myself. But it does teach me how my energy levels fluctuate, you know, and what I need in order to have connected relationships and meaningful relationships, and what that looks like for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think similarly, I would say what's been helpful for me is to know where I have limits and that I can't do everything that I want to do. I can't have the same amount of drive or motivation or production, like to get something done, whenever I need to take into account that things are at times overwhelming or exhausting or just too much. So having to pace myself, which probably ties in then to what I'm learning, which is more about myself and really what my body is telling me, like to listen a little bit more somatically to when I need to rest or when I need to lighten up on my expectations for myself for that day, and how I need to pace it and keep a sense of balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, balance is extremely important right now, and it's so hard to find it because it feels like everything keeps changing.
And it feels like a high stress moment. So I'm willing to be more relaxed with myself if that's my third cookie.
And as far as high stress moment, like indefinitely.
Right.
You know,
continuous.
because it's ongoing. It's kind of chronic, kind of constant of all of that unknown and uncertainty that we're just right in the middle of. And we really don't have an idea of how long. So that's really where we wanted to go with this episode today. Last time on Community Roots, we talked about our initial reactions to COVID-19 and some different emotions that we experience with that. And we thought for this part 2 edition, we would talk about how we sustain ourselves in this time. Like, what's our long-term plan, particularly whenever we feel exhausted?
Yeah, so maybe this was an awesome representation, if I do say for the three of us, of a good conversation with those 3 questions, just to check in with ourselves. So just to go over them, I'll put them in the show notes as well, but just so everybody knows, what has been the hardest part, what has been the most helpful, and what are you learning? And those are just a good check-in for your friends and family.
Or even to, I think relationally, it's great to conversation starters to connect with your friends and family, as well as people who want a journal prompt to be able to reflect back on COVID-19. What are some things that you might want to journal about? I think those 3 questions are helpful for that too. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, first of all, what makes this quarantine such an exhausting time, like understanding some of the exhaustion behind mental, emotional, relational strain that we've been under for quite a while.
I actually wanted to take that and ask a question about cortisol levels, because we were just talking about how this is such a high stress time, and the exhaustion of being at a heightened level of stress. I mean, that's permeating everything. So it'd be interesting to know if we could, if we were all still going to the doctor regularly or taking our blood pressure at home regularly, just to know what that was doing to our bodies, the effect of this high stress time on a chemical level with our bodies, because that has to play a huge portion into this exhaustion.
Absolutely. I think stress, especially, it's interesting that stress can be a good thing for us. It's not something that we want to remove from our lives or from our children. Like, stress can be something that teaches us or guides us in knowing what we need, or being able to respond to that or build resilience through it. So there are good things with stress. It's not that we need to have a complete absence of stress, but whenever we're spending a long amount of time, like outside our window of tolerance, for instance, that we've mentioned before, or everything is just too much, too hard, too long, we need to be able to give ourselves more support in that time to bring those stress levels down. Well, I guess I'm just looking for some conversation around this idea of exhaustion, and like one of the areas that I personally see it is information overload, because like I mentioned, one of the things that is the hardest part for me, that it has been so much to take in and to process, because every company is trying to share their view on COVID-19 or how they're keeping you safe, or the extra emails, the extra communication that happens, all the extra trainings. Like, all of those things are awesome in and of themselves. That's great to communicate. That's a healthy thing to do. Or it's great to have opportunities to be trained or to learn more. But when you have it flooding in all at once, when you're in a time that is already overwhelming, where you're trying to figure out how you can process something when you're in the middle of it. So often time is an interesting thing with trauma, because we're often not fully processing something as we're going through it. We actually have to continue to process after an event and look back on, and all those emotions that we're feeling, all this energy towards, like that we mentioned in our episode last time, all the grief, the sadness, the numbness, the overwhelm, the maybe irritation, frustration, agitation type things. All of those have energy in them that will go on longer than the quarantine. And so it's not like it'll be fully processed when we get through that. So all of this, information overload, or whatever you want to call it, is just taking a toll on us all the time.
Yeah, what is the best way to prepare yourself for long-term trauma like that? Because I read that like journaling is really good for processing in the moment, as well as like just taking good care of yourself, like a lot of the tips that we talk about on the show as far as like mental well-being and mental tips is like exercising, eating, drinking water, stuff like that. But then I also read somewhere that processing your trauma too early can be harmful. Is that true, or would you recommend just processing as you go through it anyway?
I've never actually heard that too soon is harmful. I would say maybe in the sense of, like, for someone wanting to, are you talking about like someone trying to process something while they're in it?
It's possible. Maybe they were talking from a standpoint of like a car crash, and then trying to like pull somebody from the car crash and being like, let's process this traumatic moment right now. But rather, I was just curious because I read that kind of further down. I think they were talking about like PTSD and how sometimes you can like inflame the PTSD by talking about it too soon. But it was also just like a random user comment rather than the actual main article, which was about how to keep good mental health through the pandemic.
Gotcha.
So that's where I was just asking, because I think I had heard that somewhere else before, but I am obviously good to give it over to the actual therapist rather than the random user on Reddit.
Well, what comes to mind for me is someone who is wanting to, for instance, go to counseling because they are trying to work through trauma in their life. And sometimes they want to go quickly, or, they want to see a sense of accomplishing something or feeling a sense of relief from their distress, or there's a sense of urgency to it because they're so overwhelmed, or because they want to get through it quickly. But in reality, it's better in the counseling setting to have a safe therapeutic rapport and connection so that you can feel grounded and able to work through all the layers of it. So in that regard, I can see where you wouldn't want to cause damage by processing too much too quickly. As far as, do we have to wait until the quarantine is over or COVID-19 is behind us before we can start processing it? I don't see the value in that. I think that what you're able to take in, I think the thing that would be most emphasized, from trauma experts that I'm familiar with Bruce Perry or Bessel van der Kolk, it would be to dose it and to titrate it. So you're just doing a little bit at a time. So what can be re-traumatizing or making the trauma worse is if you try to take it all in and do it all at once and be intense with it. It's really something you have to be more intentionally slow about and just doing a small amount at a time, or we will increase the trauma or cause more of a resistance to it, that we would avoid it, or that we would have to bury it, stuff it, numb it, medicate it, all those different things that we do that aren't healthy. But if we're able to keep it in small doses and reflect on it here and there for just a little bit, it makes it much more manageable. That's going to keep it within our window of tolerance so that we can, just a little at a time, start to make sense of it. So the idea of how we process trauma, do we do that while we're in the middle of trauma, or do we wait until we feel like we've gotten through some of it, or how do we do the timing with that? I would say that it's helpful if you are able to process as you go through something to the extent that you feel able to, and to do just a little bit of reflection at a time, and not trying to kind of dive into the deep end of feeling all your feelings at once and getting drowned by them. If you're not particularly familiar with what it's like to feel, or you don't know how to kind of pace that or balance it, then you don't want to suddenly be in the deep end and drowning with it. And so, like, a metaphor that I sometimes use is the image of a faucet, that if we can kind of turn a faucet slowly on and allow some of the emotion to come through so that we're able to feel some of it, but we're able to slow it down a little bit whenever it's coming too much too fast. We don't just completely burst the pipes open with everything that we're feeling. We try to take it a little bit at a time and do it slowly.
So like reducing our pace. What was that? What would that look like, Julie, if you don't mind, for us right now, as we are stuck in these homes and maybe feeling overwhelmed with all of our feelings? But can you kind of walk us through doing that right now?
So sure. I think similarly to the check-in that we did at the beginning with each other, whenever we're doing that sort of a check-in with ourselves throughout the day. And one of the great questions I think that is helpful, that speaks to our brainstem, I heard this great quote this week by a colleague that said, the way we talk to our brainstem is by noticing. And so the idea of that being like, what am I noticing in my senses right now? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? How am I experiencing this externally, like around the room, when I look around the room? What am I noticing internally? Do I have tension in my shoulders or my neck or my back? Am I taking time to breathe slowly? Am I drinking enough water? So kind of getting a feel for where I am within myself, but also how am I interacting with others? All of that kind of self-awareness type check-ins that you can do with yourself. You might want to do a scaling kind of method of, how am I feeling today, 0 to 10? Am I noticing like I'm feeling this level of depressed type feelings or sadness, or am I feeling another level of anxious thoughts and feelings? If you want to track one particular aspect or another, you can kind of use that 0 to 10. Or sometimes people like to do like a 0 to 3 because it's less numbers and less choices. So you kind of find what feels good for you and what works for you to kind of stay in touch with yourself and to be able to reconnect with yourself. That's a way of processing through the trauma as we're going through it. You're not spending your whole day doing it, thinking all the time and being introspective and reflective constantly, but you're able to kind of throughout the day, maybe it's in the morning or at the night, or maybe it's a midday thing, but you kind of just check in and pause and notice at different points.
I also think in terms of like getting able to like flex that muscle, like use it in a way that the more you get used to it, then the easier it is. Like what happened was I was learning how to meditate at working at Banana Republic, and I just do it on my breaks because honestly I'd get to work so early in the morning that I'd be just exhausted, so I needed like a 10-minute mental nap on my break. And but I found myself doing it throughout the day, even unprompted, just to be able to check in with myself, and it was just like a quick check-in. So I definitely think it is kind of like a muscle. If you just purposefully train it at first, then you'll check in with yourself more often throughout the day.
I think that's a great analogy, looking at it as building that muscle and being more mindfully aware that there are different pauses that you can take through the day. If you're working at your computer a lot for your job and you take those stretch breaks, like get up and walk around the room, just move to a different room. Those pauses can be moments of checking in with yourself, just kind of being aware of what you're experiencing.
I was probably last weekend, I was in a hammock that we set up in our porch, and I started to get overwhelmed with so much anxiety. And that's my go-to, my automatic self, or like anytime I'm feeling anything, I hit anxiety levels. And through practicing and through therapy, I took that anxiety and I wrestled with it for a little bit, and I unpacked some sadness. And it was really interesting to be able to, like, I hit this anxiety and I kind of asked myself, okay, like, what's this coming from? Like, not so much why am I anxious, but like, what is this doing in me? Like, where is this coming from? And I sat with it, and then all of a sudden, all this grief, all this sadness just came to the top, and it allowed me to identify what the emotion was behind the anxiety, or at least some of it, and then to address it and then I just allowed myself to be sad for a little bit and said, man, I am sad. Like, this is a lot of work going on in this moment. And I'm relating to that, of that slowing down, of that taking a self-assessment. Unfortunately, like for me, the anxiety just hits, and that's when I have to take the self-assessment, because I need to do that more often throughout the day. Mm-hmm. I think that would help with before I hit an anxiety level. If I'm,
yeah, for sure. Some more frequent check-ins so that they can be smaller.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Bruce Perry talks about as related to COVID-19 was how mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausting all of this is. And the idea to pull back and just slow everything down, because part of how we experience trauma is that there's this loss of time and we can't figure out if it's happening too fast and too much, or how to take it all in. And so he suggested to be able to really downshift and reduce your pace of what you're trying to accomplish and make it more kind of a fraction of what you normally do, so that you are able to handle it more, instead of having, business as usual, keep going at the same pace, to really adjust and adapt to a more reasonable level.
I think also playing into what I see with that comment is, I know that slowing everything down is important to you, Mom, just in the conversations we've had. Something that I see a little bit with that is like being more forgiving with yourself and just being okay, and kind of having some more patience. Patience is something I would add to what I'm learning throughout all this. And so I see that pull back, slow everything down as like, you know what, if you don't do all the million things that you had hoped that you would do at the beginning of the day, that's okay. And it might seem bigger because that's all you have going in your life right now is like what you have planned for that day, as opposed to like other people's stories or hardships and stuff. So anyway, I see that as a thing to also say, pull back from being so stressed about yourself and stuff like that, and what you plan to do.
I think that's a great validation that you just gave there of why it feels so overwhelming, is because our day in front of us is everything right now. Like everything that we had hoped to do or connect with, or to even help ourselves feel okay, is all surrounded in what's happening right now, because it's just all we have right now, kind of, in a way. So that makes sense.
I think, yeah, to just expand on it a little bit, just like yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I think that's what it feels like. Those are the 3 days right now. It's less Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and more what happened yesterday, what happened today, and what happens tomorrow.
That's a cool perspective. I like it. So some of what in how are we going to sustain ourselves in this time? Like, what's our plan for all of this exhaustion? A couple of things came to mind to us as we were reflecting on where we would want to take this episode. And the same concepts that we've talked about before came up on how we stay grateful for things, finding those moments of gratitude that we always end our episodes on, but then also how we are building resilience, and that this is not just a time of traumatic experience. It's also an opportunity for post-traumatic growth and what we're developing, and skills and muscles that are being built because we are going through a storm, and because it's teaching us how to navigate in new experiences and to use that in future times that we will need that same insight, wisdom, growth, muscle, resiliency in the future.
We kind of talked about some of these like tips in our like resiliency and ACEs, or maybe our holiday help episode. Just kind of the importance of gratitude, the importance of being able to be like flexible yet still standing strong.
So this kind of ties into our question as well, as what are you learning? Like, what are your takeaways? What will be the things that you actually feel an immense amount of connection to from COVID-19 that maybe were life-changing for you in the best of ways? What are some of those things? I think as we articulate that, we find some of the depth of resiliency in that.
It was as we're processing all of this together, this idea of gratitude and resiliency, I feel a little weary almost for finding gratitude. And I think it's because it's a muscle I haven't used. This idea of finding something to be grateful for right now. I don't know why it's striking a chord with me as we go through this, because I know it's healthy and I know it's like eating your vegetables, right? And it's something that if you don't eat vegetables, then you're less likely to want to eat them, but your body craves them. Your body identifies the need for those nutrients. The resiliency, I think, I also struggle with because my anxiety will flare up and I don't feel resilient, and I don't want to try. Like, it's part of the exhaustion right now is I'm exhausted, and the idea of building resiliency sounds like work. And I'm just speaking candidly, but I think what we're going to talk about next will help us build that resiliency without it being work, without it feeling like more effort, because more effort right now, I'm already exhausted. So I'm already at zero. It just feels like I'll go into negative territory if I have to give any more of myself. But go ahead, Samuel.
Before we jump into what we're about to jump into, I wanted to talk about resiliency because I think it's cool because you already did it. Like, if you're listening to this podcast and the three of us on the phone, we are resilient people. We've been through trauma. The fact that we're still breathing makes us resilient. And
your survival rate is 100% because every day you got through up till now. Every single day you made it through.
And so resiliency is, I think, more about trying to just take care of yourself while you're already surviving. But not to in any way say, this is just why I think resiliency is one of my more favorite tools in the belt, just to remind myself, like, hey, I'm here. We're 30 days into the quarantine. Like, we're over a month into the quarantine. I've already done most of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already halfway. Like, however long this is going to last, I've already been doing it. And so this resiliency is something that all of us have within ourselves. Like, off air, we were talking about adaptability and how adapting can be so difficult sometimes. But that's also everything we've ever done ever, is just adapt to a new situation. Like, I would say one of my more difficult things with this quarantine has been the monotony rather than the adaptation, which I guess is adapting to monotony, which is kind of ironic. But I get passionate about resiliency because I think of people, and I think, like, all of us have been through a lot and we're already resilient. It's something that you've already done. And so you can work on making it better, but you're already a resilient person. Whether or not you get in your enough gratitude for the day, or if you get enough water, or enough, like, if you're eating healthy food rather than potato chips, you've already done it. You're resilient. You did it.
I think
and you can maybe do it better, but you've already accomplished the resiliency part. And so maybe working on our resiliency is a way that we can benefit, but it's a trait we already have.
And I think what that also speaks to, which is so cool, as you were sharing very vulnerably and honestly, Sarah, about the struggle of gratitude or feeling resilient, I was thinking about how important it is for us to have that sense of community and connection, because we don't have to come up with that alone. I mean, Stephen Porges' Polyvagal Theory is all about that we need that ventral vagal social engagement interaction with each other, so that when you start to feel like you're slipping and you're weary, there's someone there, like Samuel just echoed in with his, let me tell you about resiliency. And he was passionate about it. And I felt the energy in that. And there's a shift there that's like, okay, I don't have to come up with this by myself. I'm not going to just, go off in the corner or collapse or drown. I'm going to be connected to people that we can support each other and walk together, which isn't just about, pulling somebody out of a sad or hard place, because sometimes it's just a matter of presence and sitting with them in it. So I'm not wanting to suggest, that it's getting you out of the mood that you're in, but there's also a sense of just needing that presence with others. And that's what popped in my head with the whole ventral vagal. Like, we find resiliency by being with people and walking together with people, which is what we really want to accomplish in this podcast too.
I definitely felt that Samuel wasn't trying to drag me out so much as it was a connectedness of you're not alone, like jumping down in the hole with me and saying, oh yeah, like, but you're resilient. Like you're in this hole. But I'm here too. And I really appreciate that. I think that's what this connectedness is all about, is knowing that you're not alone, that it's not a matter of trying to get you away from where you are.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, it's joining you, and that connectedness is a lifeline.
Absolutely. So there was an article that was posted by Eileen Feliciano. We're trying to work on her name, and I am so sorry if I completely botched that. But the title of the article is Mental Health Wellness Tips for Quarantine. And she came up with 25 different things. And at the time of this recording, it has had over 84,000 reads. And so there are people that are definitely benefiting from the encouragement in this list. But I thought we would just kind of close with, which of these 25 things are we finding ourselves using that have been helpful? What's working for you?
Well, I'll start. I will say I will stick this link in the show notes so that everybody can also participate in kind of like, what are you doing well in? But so click it now. I'm just kidding. So one of the ones I've been practicing, I think, really well is number 2, like, dress for the social life you want, not the social life you have. Like, I think that for me, having a good set of clothes on, I feel confident, like brush teeth so I don't feel like I'm just exhuming like coffee breath. I think are both beneficial to me, and I think I've just made it a point. It's rather like there are totally days that I'm totally just in sweats and a hoodie, but I totally think that I'm more productive on days that I dress ready for the day and like I'm getting up. And then maybe some other ones that I thought of as well was getting outside every day. Connie and I are like, it stopped raining at like 10 p.m. a couple nights ago, and we're like, now's our chance, get outside. We'll walk real quick, even if it's to the end of the block. I think that nature is something that heals us mentally, and so I'm a big proponent of that sort of thing.
And just to say it is kind of fun to walk in the rain with a really cute umbrella. I really love the color of my umbrella. It's bright and kind of a pinkish, rosish color that it just makes me happy to have it. And sometimes it's kind of fun to walk in the rain. So it doesn't have to be something that keeps you inside.
I think that's a good point. And I also think too, like, that just brought up for me, one of the tips to get your kids to wash their hands is to get them a special soap, like a soap that they pick out and they like the scent a lot, and then they get really excited. It's kind of like if you have a really nice umbrella that you want to see and it's raining out, you're like, ooh, I get to use my umbrella.
Exactly. I honestly feel a little happy about it whenever I do. I'm always like, oh, it's raining, I need my umbrella, because the color of it is just happy to me.
And then I want to point out one last other thing is find lightness and humor in each day. I think it's important kind of to take that break. We talked about earlier it being traumatizing to overload yourself with your traumatic experience. And I think being able to take some breaks, find humor, like laugh at a joke that you wouldn't necessarily have laughed at before, because we need that little break. And so I've been finding myself pulling up different TV shows, and just Connie and I have done like a TV show exchange where we're exchanging like favorite shows growing up. And so it's been nice just to watch one and just to try to laugh and try to like change things up.
One of these on here is take time to let's see, something about expressive art. It's like crafting expressive art, and find an expressive art and go for it. So the other day I asked one of my roommates, Olivia, to teach me how to play the ukulele, and we got a little ways into it, but just enough that it felt new. It was something I've never tried before, and ended up making it my own in my own way, and allowed myself just to toy around with, alternately strumming and screaming, and it was just fun. I felt like a child for a hot second, and I look forward to going back to that expressive art. And it doesn't have to be painting or a traditional art of singing or something. It can be whatever you want. Just express. Julie and I were doing a little bit of expressive yoga nonsense earlier as we were emoting. And that felt like
healthy movement.
Exactly. Healthy movement. The other thing that struck me was expect behavioral issues in children. And I added, and adults to that.
Good ad.
Because I find myself dealing with behavioral issues and maybe temper tantrums, or what we would call temper tantrums, but it's this expression of emotion, and I just don't know how to handle it. And so as you know, we do have to go to the grocery. You're standing in line and you're still engaging with people, but we're all in this together. But don't expect people to behave as we all normally would. We're all like, our cortisol levels, our stress levels are up. So if you do have children, expect behavioral issues. If you don't have children, or even if you do have children and there are other adults around, expect behavioral issues there as well. And then one of the last things that I took away from this is remind yourself that this is temporary, and kind of come back to that this isn't permanent, that this too will pass, this too will change, and it'll evolve. And like we talked about earlier with adaptation, this is all an ongoing process, but we're all doing this together. We're all in this. You're not alone in experiencing what you're experiencing. And it will change.
I think that temporary nature was also something that stuck out to me that I've been practicing, is knowing that this is a season, this is a storm. Maya Angelou said that every storm runs out of rain. And I think that's kind of cool to think about it in terms of the weather too, because we're so aware of how temporary weather is, that it shifts and changes. And so does this quarantine, and so does COVID-19. And there's nothing about it that's permanent, even though it feels intense at the moment. And the other one that I liked from the article was number 13, which says lower expectations and practice radical self-acceptance. And so as we're learning how to pace ourselves and slow things down, and maybe we don't get everything accomplished, that's okay. It's okay to be where you are today. And that's a good thing, to be able to show yourself some loving kindness. It will also help you to show that loving kindness to others.
Julie, I like with that 13 as well, there's the last sentence that says, you cannot fail at this. There is no roadmap, no precedent for this. And we are all truly doing the best we can in an impossible situation.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, that might be a good thing to end everything on. We had a lot of gratitudes throughout all of this, and maybe even a gratitude at the end. What do you guys think? Do you want to do gratitudes, or are you good?
Yeah, I can do gratitudes.
Look at Sarah coming up with the gratitude after she was thinking she was done and had 0. See how that shifts and changes?
I know, I'm not alone, and I was vulnerable, and that takes a huge...
That's a beautiful thing.
Step. Yes. So should I head right into my gratitude right now?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. I am grateful for water, and I am grateful for vulnerability, even in moments when I didn't think I needed to be vulnerable. If I just allow myself to be real and allow myself to express that we are all in this together, and people will come and be with you in those moments, like Samuel was for me, and like Julie has been for me, and my roommates have been for me throughout this in many different ways. I am grateful to not be going through this traumatic experience alone.
That's such good stuff, Sarah. I love all of that.
Yes.
I think I would say I am thankful for us being together, and I'm so looking forward to whenever we can be together in person. But I am really thankful whenever we are just, we are gathered together, and we are connecting, and we are reaching out as well to connect with others. And that is so important. And I'm so grateful that that is part of our human experience, that is needed, and something that just refuels us, refreshes us, and is life-giving for us.
Yeah, I'll close it up. I think right here in this moment, I am very grateful for just community. Being able to reach out and feeling people reach out back is very comforting, and having these moments of bonding. I would also say I think that investing in community roots is paying off in a lot of ways for me, just in how to deal with these stressful events. Like, as far as the listener goes, I've had some outside conversations with Mom, that happens, but like the majority of my mental health growth has happened from, well, it's happened privately as well. But just to say, if you listen to these episodes, you've caught up a lot of what I've learned. So I'm thankful for that, because I've also felt a lot of my friends become stressed and needed support, and I've been able to kind of assist them in ways that are beneficial and healthy, rather than just being like, yeah, how about you just go get wasted tonight and it'll be better in the morning. And so anyway, I'm very grateful for my own growth, and how in periods of stress it kind of brings out strength. And anyway, so I would encourage everybody who's listening to practice some of these gratitudes at home. Use some of the check-in questions that we talked about. I'll post those, and go through the habits in the link that I send out, and say, what am I doing well? And kind of coming at it from a position of strength, and then maybe grab some ideas too if you're feeling a little bit stressed and overwhelmed. But anyway, that is our episode for today. We will see everyone next week with Off the Beaten Path, I believe. And if not, we'll have some cool extra bonus content for you. So I hope everybody stays safe and stays healthy. And remember, it's only temporary. So we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Bye.